everybody. How are you today? It's almost Halloween, and I have got to finish getting my costume ready and Papa's costume ready and all the things I have for the trick-or-treaters. I'm so excited. So today I'm going to read Arthur's Halloween. Look at Arthur all dressed up. He's a superhero, Super Arthur. It was the night before Halloween. Arthur's family was busy making the house look spooky. It looked so spooky, in fact, that Arthur had trouble falling asleep. Oh dear. Things were even worse the next morning. "Help!" screamed Arthur when he opened his eyes. "It's just me," said his sister D.W. "Boy, are you jumpy. Don't forget, you have to take me trick-or-treating tonight." She really scared him. Do I really have to?" asked Arthur as he ate his cereal. "You really do," said his mother. "And I want to go to every house," said D.W. Arthur groaned. "I'll be the only one who has to drag his baby sister along." "Oh, I don't think so, Arthur." Arthur didn't recognize anyone at school. There was a giant robot in his classroom taking attendance. "You sound just like my teacher, Mr. Marco," said Arthur. "I am your teacher," said the robot. The only one Arthur recognized was the brain. He was wrapped in aluminum foil. "I'm a baked potato," said the brain. And that's a funny costume. Francine passed out special morning snacks. "Eat these," she said. "They're bat wing brownies and vampire blood." Everyone ate them but Arthur. Then they all put on blindfolds. Buster passed around bowls he said were filled with human eyeballs, hearts, and brains. Arthur turned pale. When it was his turn, he wouldn't even touch them. "What a scaredy cat," said Francine. "Chicken," said Muffy. "They're only peeled grapes, jello, and cold spaghetti." Poor Arthur. When it came time to go trick-or-treating, Buster knew which houses to skip. "Don't go there," he said. "They only give apples." "Gross," said Francine. "And don't go to the big house on the corner," said Buster. "That's the witch's house. My brother saw someone go in there last Halloween, and he never came out." Arthur tried not to look afraid. Arthur and his sister had trouble keeping up with the others. First, D.W. got her tail caught. Then her bag broke. "You're such a pain in the neck," said Arthur. "D.W. must be short for dimwit." But D.W. didn't answer. Arthur turned around just in time to see her disappear into the witch's house. Oh no! Arthur's hands turned ice cold and his heart began to race. He walked up to the spooky old house. The front door was open just a crack. Slowly, Arthur went inside. "Look," cried Buster. "Arthur just went into the witch's house." Oh no! "She'll probably put Arthur and D.W. into her oven just like Hansel and Gretel," said Sue Ellen. "Maybe she's using them for weird scientific experiments," said the brain. "I bet she locked them in the cellar to starve," said Buster. "Maybe we should follow him," said Francine. "Maybe we should call the police," said Muffy. Everyone was too scared to move. Oh no! Inside the house, it was very cold. Arthur thought he saw ghosts all around him. He walked down a long, dark hall, and at the end he saw a light under a door. He heard voices, and one was his sister's. "Oh, there you are," said the witch. "We were waiting for you." I came to get my sister. We have to go. I hear my mother calling us," said Arthur. "I don't hear anything," said D.W. "My name is Mrs. Tibble. I hope you won't leave without some cider and donuts first. They're chocolate, your favorite," said D.W. I've waited all night for trick-or-treaters, but you're the only ones, said Mrs. Tibble. Years ago, our doorbell never stopped ringing. Maybe it's broken like the windows, said D.W. Mrs. Tibble nodded. It is harder for me to keep up this big place these days. Maybe if we help you fix up your yard, the place won't look so spooky, said Arthur. That's a good idea, isn't it? That was very nice of Arthur. Arthur finished his donut as Mrs. Tibble opened the door and turned on the porch light. She gave Arthur and D.W. a big hug. See you Saturday to rake leaves, said Arthur. Oh, look at that. Oh, they made a new friend. You're still alive, said Francine. I can't believe you went in there alone, said the brain. You're so brave, said Sue Ellen. What's in the bag, asked Buster. Probably eyeballs, hearts, and brains, said Francine. Oh, it's easy to find out, said Arthur. Just close your eyes and reach in unless you're too scared. We've been to every house now. Can we take the shortcut home through the cemetery, asked D.W. The cemetery? On Halloween? Are you guys crazy, asked Francine. Follow me, said Arthur as he marched ahead. The cemetery is a great place. People are just dying to get in. And there's a picture of Arthur and all his friends taking the shortcut through the cemetery. And they made a new friend, Mrs. Tibble. How wonderful is that? And one last story, Winnie the Pooh's Halloween. Winnie the Pooh. The late afternoon sun appeared to hesitate on the horizon, settling comfortably among the tip-top branches of the trees of the 100-acre wood, as if reluctant to turn off its light and make way for the night. Look, chuckled Winnie the Pooh from the grassy knoll where he and his friends were watching the sunset. The sun doesn't want to go to bed. Perhaps it's afraid of the dark, suggested Piglet, who was much fonder of the sun's arriving and spending the day than he was of its going to bed and leaving animals to bump around in the dark. Christopher Robin put his arm comfortably around Piglet's shoulders. No, Piglet, he explained. The sun simply wants to stay and share Halloween with us. Oh, remarked Pooh Bear. Is Halloween perhaps a very small smackerel of something sweet? He licked his lips hopefully. To eat? Don't be silly, Pooh Bear, snorted Rabbit. A Halloween isn't something to eat. Course not, agreed Tigger, bouncing up and down on his coiled tail. Everybody knows that. Pardon me for saying so, interrupted Eeyore, looking up from where he was sniffing a particularly tasty-looking thistle. But knowing what something isn't doesn't exactly tell us what something is, which seems to me to be the point. If that's what we're looking for, the point, I mean. Never mind the point, whistled Gopher. All I want to know is what the ding-dang we're talking about. Halloween, announced Pooh. And what exactly is a Halloween? Demanded Gopher. They don't know what Halloween is. The friends exchanged shrugs and puzzled frowns, then turned to Christopher Robin for an answer. Pooh smiled. Christopher Robin always had answers for the confusing questions. Halloween, Christopher Robin informed them, is the scariest holiday of the year because it takes place at night. You mean, gulped Piglet, it is a holiday that takes place in the very darkness? The darker the better, Piglet. Things are so much more frightening then, don't you think? Well, if you don't mind, responded Piglet, trying to keep his ears from trembling, I think I'll be thinking as little as possible about scary things that happen in the dark. But that's what Halloween is, protested Christopher Robin. When the sun goes down, we all dress up in costumes and see who can be the scariest. Piglet noticed the sun was no longer resting comfortably in the treetops, but was in fact almost out of sight, behind the horizon. I'm sorry, I won't have time to play Halloween with you, Piglet blurted out. I have some very important things to do. What could be more important than scaring the pants off each other in the dark? Tigger wanted to know. "Well, turning on every light in my house and dusting under my bed," said Piglet. "But Piglet," asked Pooh, "who cares whether or not there's dust under your bed?" "I do," answered Piglet, hurrying away into the dusk, "because that's where I'm going to be spending Halloween." Oh, Piglet almost seems like he's afraid of Halloween. "Poor Piglet," sighed Christopher Robin. "But I suppose the nice thing about a holiday is that we all have the opportunity to suit ourselves." "And that's just what I'm going to do," laughed Tigger, bouncing around his friends in excited circles. "Hoo, hoo, hoo!" As the others shouted their agreement, Pooh was strangely silent. "What's the matter, Pooh Bear?" Christopher Robin asked. "Well, I suppose I'm going to miss sharing Halloween with my best friend Piglet." "That's too bad. You're simply going to have twice as much fun as anyone else and share it with him later." "Why, what a nice idea!" exclaimed Pooh. "And I'll have to be twice as scary, too." "You'd better get started on your costume," laughed Christopher Robin. "Oh, yes," Pooh mused, beginning a slow ramble home. "My costume. I wonder what they're all going to be, don't you?" Pooh remembered that his scariest experiences were whenever he visited the honey tree. And nothing is scarier than a honeybee, Pooh decided, and that's what I'm going to be, a bee. So when Pooh arrived home, he immediately opened up his chest of odds, ends, and middles of items of no possible use to anyone except to a bear of very little brain, and began to look for his costume. In no time at all, Pooh was ready. With black paint, Pooh had painted large stripes around his middle. A plunger was stuck to his sitting down side, and on his head were Pooh's answer to antenna, 2 wobbly springs capped with ping-pong balls. "Now that," Pooh said to himself, "is very alarming indeed." Look at Pooh as a bumblebee. Isn't he cute? He hurried out to meet his friends, convinced there would be no one better suited for Halloween than he. The night had become quite dark, despite a sky full of stars and a huge autumn moon. Pooh would have walked right over Gopher without seeing him, but then he noticed 2 glowing eyes peering out of the gloom. "Well," Gopher's voice demanded, "what do you think?" Pooh had to look very closely to distinguish his practically invisible friend at all. He was wrapped head to foot in a billowing black cape. "Gopher, you certainly surprised me. I knew I would. Nothing spookier than a dark night, so that's what I decided to be. I scared myself out of a week's sleep when I looked in the mirror. I love this Halloween." Look at that. Before Pooh and Gopher could discuss costumes further, Tigger dropped very suddenly out of the night sky and landed with a thump between them. Then with a loud hoo hoo hoo, he squirted them both with a small water pistol. "Tigger!" spluttered Pooh, rubbing the water out of his eyes. Tigger had donned a bright red jersey with a wriggly bolt of yellow lightning emblazoned across the front. "Who do you think you are?" whistled Gopher. "You know the rainstorm everyone's so afraid is going to show up at the wrong time and rain on whatever it is they don't want rained on?" Tigger gave Gopher and Pooh another little squirt. "Well, I'm here. Terrifying, ain't I?" Their costumes are cute. "Not to me," rumbled the voice from behind them. All 3 spun around in surprise. "Eeyore!" they shouted with delight. He was wearing a large red nose carefully taped over his own, as well as a yellow ruffled collar around his neck, and on his head was perched the tallest and pointiest clown hat anyone had ever seen, and it was crowned by a huge feathery orange ball. "I was afraid if I were too frightening, I'd have to spend Halloween alone. I hope I didn't frighten anyone too badly." "Just barely," Eeyore reassured him. "If I hadn't heard your friendly voice first, I'm sure I would be running for my life this very moment." "No doubt about it," added Gopher. "Abso-positively," agreed Tigger. "I shouldn't believe you for a minute," grumbled Eeyore. Then a smile spread across his face. The 4 friends began a long, loud laugh that stopped very suddenly in the middle when they saw Rabbit staring at them in annoyance. "What are you laughing at?" Rabbit wanted to know. "This is the most frightening costume I could think of." Rabbit had pasted soft clumps of white cotton all over himself. They all struggled for a suitable word. It's very fluffy, Pooh finally blurted out. Perhaps it would be more frightening, suggested Eeyore, if you told us what you are. Rabbit leaned close and whispered, I'm a dust bunny, and shuddered at the thought. There's nothing more frightening to me than those little balls of lint with minds of their own collecting where I can't take a broom to them. Oh, their costumes are all so unique. The thought of wayward dust suddenly reminded Pooh of Piglet huddled all alone under his bed. I'm sure Piglet would be terrified of your costume, Rabbit, said Pooh sadly. Before Rabbit could respond, however, a long, low moan sounded, rattling ominously out of the darkness, causing everyone to stiffen in surprise. Ooh! What was that? Tigger whispered. I don't think I want to wait to see this costume, said Rabbit with a shiver. Me neither, responded Gopher through chattering teeth. Another moan drifted out of the blackness under the trees. Woo! I think we should go to Piglet, suggested Pooh, and make sure he's not too frightened. Woo! The moan sounded much closer this time. Oh my goodness. You're right, Pooh. That's what friends are for. Last one to Piglet's house is not first, shouted Tigger. The friends ran headlong through the 100-acre wood, silver moonlight illuminating the path beneath their pounding feet. In the distance, Piglet's house had every light ablaze and shone like a beacon to guide weary travelers home. Tigger threw open Piglet's front door and sped inside, followed closely by Rabbit, Gopher, and Pooh, with a panting Eeyore bringing up the rear. Thundering across Piglet's gleaming floors, they all tried to stop, but the hours of careful waxing by the fastidious Piglet proved their downfall. Skidding through the house, feet skating frantically for a foothold, they all slipped into their soft sides and slid in a tangle to end up in a pile under Piglet's bed. Piglet? Asked Pooh quietly. Then upon realizing his friend was nowhere to be found, he shouted at the top of his lungs, Piglet! Woo! Sounded an answer from outside the bed. It got Piglet, Pooh whispered. No, answered Piglet's voice from where the moan had sounded a moment before. Then the bedspread lifted and the smiling Piglet joined them under the bed. It didn't get me. It is me. Oh, you mean that loud noise was you all the time? Exclaimed Rabbit. Yes, Piglet admitted happily. Who would have guessed, Pooh laughed, that the scariest costume turned out to be no costume at all. You see, Piglet explained in a very small voice, I was so scared about being scared that I knew the only way Halloween was going to be a holiday for me was if I was the most frightening one of all. And you did a stupendous job, laughed Tigger, patting Piglet on the back. But what do we do now? Well, said Pooh thoughtfully, noting how cozy it was, all snuggled under Piglet's bed. Why don't we stay here and share Halloween? And have hot chocolate, suggested Eeyore. And tell scary stories, added Tigger. Excellent, announced Rabbit. I'll go first. Once upon a time there was a giant dust bunny. As Rabbit continued, Pooh put his arm around Piglet's shoulders, and they exchanged happy smiles. I think I like Halloween, Pooh Bear, Piglet whispered to his friend. Me too, Piglet, Pooh whispered back as he scooted closer. Me too. So, happy Halloween. It's coming soon. I love you all. Bye. Boo!
Amen.